Hi, it's Fred, co-host of the Twilight Pwn podcast.
And I'm Robbie the Robot, executive producer of the show.
Assistant co-producing engineer, but...
That's what I said.
Anyway, if you're like us, the holiday season makes you think of one thing.
Spiked eggnog. Peppermint schnapps?
Well...
Stocking stuffed with airplane-sized bottles of Jack Daniels?
Sure. It also means that it's time for our annual non-denominational holiday giveaway contest. This year you can win a bunch of cool prizes, including a signed copy of Anne Serling's book about her father, Rod Serling, of course, a new Twilight Zone trivia book, and some cool toys. All you have to do to enter is write your own Rod Serling-style intro to an episode of your choosing.
It could be a bad episode, or a classic, like Uncle Simon, or The Brain Center at Whipple's.
Right, it can be any episode. Just write or record yourself reading out loud your own new Serling-style intro and send it to twilightpwn@gmail.com before December 25th. Once again, write your own Serling-style intro for any episode of The Twilight Zone. It's got to be new Serling-style intro, but write your own and send it in to twilightpwn@gmail.com. Good luck and happy holidays.
Season's drinkings.
Greetings.
Whatever.
Unidentified aircraft or something crashed into the hills north of our village late last night. Object is metal and circular. Officer Hermano Salvador and myself investigated the scene of the crash. Found evidence of footprints and broken brush. Salvador followed same. I heard several shots. Found body of Officer Salvador.
Hello, and welcome to the Twilight Pwn, the internet's third most popular Twilight Zone podcast. My name is John. I'm joined by my co-host, Fred.
Hello.
How you doing this week, Fred?
Pretty good. Happy holidays to you.
Happy holidays. You know, here we are with our episode that's going to come out right on a major holiday that's somewhat holiday themed.
I know.
Hey.
I know. We did it.
Yeah, I'm still smarting over changing of the guard. I can't believe we did that in like August one year.
Christmas in August, John. It was fun. It's the holidays. I'm here in California. I don't know if listeners can perceive the difference in microphone quality, but...
You are coming off hella chill, I will say.
Yes. Mad icy. You may hear weird noises in the background because my dad is currently getting ready for a solstice party. Christmas is illegal in Berkeley, so...
I was going to make some joke, but that better than anything I was thinking of, so okay, sure.
Yeah, my dad's he's a staunch atheist, you know. He likes to celebrate things, but it's got to be like something scientific. Like the axis of the earth tilting.
He's willing to accept that.
Yes, grudgingly. But let's take a break from all of it and record our episode.
Let's take a break from all that merriment and joy and talk about...
Exactly. And do our podcast.
And we will be discussing The Gift, a third season episode of The Twilight Zone, the 97th of the production run. It aired originally on April 27th, 1962.
The place is Mexico, just across the Texas border. A mountain village held back in time by its remoteness, and suddenly intruded upon by the 20th century. And this is Pedro, 9 years old. A lonely, rootless little boy who will soon make the acquaintance of a traveler from a distant place. We are at present 40 miles from the Rio Grande. But any place and all places can be the Twilight Zone.
Cool.
Sure. Yep.
They can. It is written, and it is so. We like to do our own Serling-style intros for these episodes. I think it's my turn to go first.
Sure.
Submitted for your Wikipedia page listing all the examples of science fiction plots acting as smug metaphors for religion. The Gift. The titular gift is a small silver box, tiny in size, rich in meaning. It is given by a man who is either an alien pretending to be a Mexican or an angel pretending to be a white man who can't speak Spanish well. And it is given to a young boy, Pedro, tragically born without emotions. Unfortunately, mirroring the fate of many a gift horse, it is looked very closely in the mouth and rejected for having poor equine dental work. It is then burnt. Jesus is somehow involved, as he often is when things get serious in the Twilight Zone.
Cool.
What you got?
Well, Fred, you know with the holidays upon us, it's hard to get things done. And you also know when I'm having trouble with ideas, I take a page from my mentor, Weird Al. So
I knew it would be. I'm just, the question on my mind is, which Christmas Carol are we doing here? Let's hear it.
Oh, if only. It only occurred to me as I was talking to you how it would have made more sense to do a Christmas Carol.
Is this just like an AC/DC song? All right, let's just do it. We'll discuss it afterwards.
In a little cafe just the other side of the border, came a man who folks say that guy did commit murder. Everyone wants him to go away, everyone except little Jose. And I knew, yes I knew this week's twist when I heard him say, come a little bit closer, I'll give you a gift, cure every ill known. Come a little bit closer, 'cause I'm all alone in the Twilight Zone.
Well, I give you mega points for committing to the melody. You don't normally do that. It's going to pair well with Bernard Herrmann's score for the Twilight Zone.
I could try for the Serling intro and mangle it the whole way through, and it's not the most popular song, so it's going to be like a hard get for a lot of people anyway, or I just go to try and sing the song.
Yeah.
So
No, you did
I went one direction and went with
Cool. All right, well, this is the third season episode of the Twilight Zone, which means you can stream it on Netflix and on Hulu, both of those. Well, Hulu's free if you have Netflix subscription. I sort of think of it as being free, but it's not.
Yes, you're right.
I am in Berkeley, so I'm more conscious of these things. Anyway.
Well, once we have the videos in our possession as the workers, then it will be free for everyone, right, Fred?
To each according to his podcasting needs.
Right.
Anyway, so check it out before we get going, because we're about to spoil the plot, which opens in a small Mexican village near the Texas border, as Serling told us in the intro. And a police officer is lugging in an injured police officer on a burro.
Classic TZ burro.
I have to give this episode points right off the bat for committing to the setting.
Sure.
That's they could have lugged him in on a cart or driven him in a car or
an American horse, but they got a good old burro.
Exactly. A+.
Yeah, they could have just put a poncho on a horse. No one would have known.
Ole! Merry Felicidad! or Feliz Navidad. Anyway, moving on. The police officer is badly injured, but it's more serious than just your standard
police shooting in Mexico. Yeah,
exactly. Anyway, it wasn't just narcotraficos. It was a strange occurrence in the desert. The alive policeman gets the telegram operator out of a bar and insists that he send a telegram to the main precinct or the central office or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Did you notice that the telegram was the longest telegram in the history of telegrams?
It was a Serling telegram.
Call me Ishmael.
To be sure.
Stop. It includes self-corrections, I fired several shots. No, many shots. The guy's just dutifully taking it down. The telegram indicates that dead police officer was shot by a stranger who came out of a UFO, sort of a tall, shadowy beast character. How do you say alien in Spanish? Do you know that one? Is it extrañero or something?
No, I don't know. There's only one way to find out, though. Extraterrestre.
I would like it if you said there's only one way to find out and you just played the clip but didn't do anything. At the end of it, it's
yeah, Fred, figure it out.
I still don't know. Cool. Well, this extraterrestre hurt the policeman who's now dead, so obviously that's scary. And then Rod comes out and disappointingly does not have a sombrero or a poncho for his intro, which he delivers. And when we get back, we meet a new character. It's a doctor, sort of the village doctor. And he's kind of the voice of calm and reason. Everybody in the town is freaked out about this. Mm-hmm. But he's, trying to get the real story out of the policeman, who's kind of exaggerating the tale each time he tells it anew.
I do have a clip of the policeman that, I don't know, I just thought it sounded funny. That's really my only justification here.
I fired several shots and later I found some breadsticks.
Breadsticks?
Not crazy, right? That did sound like you said breadsticks.
It's funny because I watched this episode the other day and I was like, Should I email John and tell him to get the breadsticks thing? Nah, he's probably busy with the holidays. Anyway.
So the body was surrounded by breadsticks.
Yes.
So we know Olive Garden's a suspect now.
Heavily involved in the conspiracy here and the cover-up.
They're outside and there's a crowd of people and the cop disperses them and you get this, I found amusing, terrible ADR.
Estamos en peligro. Es un monstruo.
We're in danger.
I guess maybe he's like, the exchange student that's with them all in the village.
Yeah.
They're like,
we're in danger.
oh, it's like the nerdy hyper white guy on the rap skit track or something.
Yeah. That's a good it's like Eddie Deezen is vacationing in this remote Mexican village.
It's funny. I actually tried to explain Eddie Deezen to my wife just yesterday, I think.
Oh. Did you know that?
Go over.
Did I tell you about my email exchange with Eddie Deezen?
No.
You didn't know that I've exchanged emails with Eddie Deezen?
Now you're just rubbing it in. Now you're
Sorry.
Like, you didn't know that I saw Star Wars 2 days earlier? You didn't know that I know Eddie Deezen?
Do you want me to go into it, or is that all right? Or
I'll probably have to cut it, but I mean,
okay. Back to the plot. So the doctor is having this conversation with Manolo, the owner of the cantina.
Hot or not, Manolo, the bartender, owner of the cantina. Young Mexican John Candy.
Yeah, oh, totally. I'm guessing that this guy is a similar...
Yeah.
Call me crazy.
Probably also a Canadian white guy.
Yes. I mean, his accent is very convincing, but there's really just a smorgasbord of fake accents. I think Manolo sounds kind of like a stereotypical, Italian. The doctor sometimes sounds kind of like a, wise old Jewish guy from the Upper West Side sometimes.
Right.
There's a real range. Anyway, the doctor and Mexican John Candy and this blind guitar player... God, this is really a rogues gallery here. And there's a little boy who's an orphan who looks at the stars, are all in this cantina. And they're discussing, the situation.
Yeah, the guitar player is kind of like the Mexican James Best. He's like the James Best of the little town.
He is, yeah. He punctuates everything everybody else says with some very
nice little strum.
Moody chords.
And he has some criticisms of Manolo's employment techniques with little Pedro.
Why would he smile, the boy? What is there to delight him? His poverty? Why should he smile? Perhaps, Manolo, perhaps on some occasion, some festive occasion, instead of handing him a broom or a tray, extend him a hand.
Good message.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of like, wading into respectability politics there.
Exactly. And then Pedro enters and the guitar player has a little exchange with him that I found amusing.
Shall I see you home, Ignacio?
No, thank you, Pedro. With me, darkness is a friend.
For you, the darkness is a casual acquaintance, Manolo. Pedro. Couldn't let it go.
Yeah.
Couldn't just leave it hanging out there.
No, yeah, I knew we couldn't get to the end of the series without another Bane. It was a question of when. Ignacio, the meaningful blind guitar player, leaves. Mm-hmm. And after he leaves, they're closing up shop, and a man arrives. It's a stranger, very intense-looking. Now, I was confused, because the people in this episode look vaguely either like fake Mexican or like...
Right. No one's looking like super Mexican, so it's hard to tell when someone who doesn't really look Mexican at all, it's like, is he supposed to look Mexican?
Yeah, is he supposed to look fake Mexican or what? But
I think he's supposed to look like an other to them.
Yeah.
I mean, not like an alien, but I think he's supposed to look like, at least Anglo, like different than... But I don't know.
Well, the odd thing is that when he comes in, he says, ¿Cómo estás? Yo quiero un, So he speaks...
Taco Bell, yeah.
Yeah, he speaks, bad Spanish like everybody else in the episode. So it's very hard to tell. But I do think the fact
But he speaks like decent English, so it's like he's an alien, but he still has that stumbly Spanish when he goes across the border to get a drink.
Yeah. Well, when you're prepping on your voyage to Earth, you only have time for one Rosetta Stone. And let's be real here.
True dat. I don't feel as strongly about this one, but I did have a hot or not for the main guy too. For Williams, I guess his name is.
The doctor?
No, the traveler, the mysterious traveler. From some angles, I thought he looked kind of like Adam Scott from Parks and Recreation. Krampus.
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
Not every angle, but some angles.
I love our discussion of angles. I saw him from every angle.
I've seen them all.
I think you definitely had him on had it on candy. I think this one we're gonna have to toss up on the Tumblr. This stranger character wants a glass of wine. Wink. Mm-hmm. Red wine, wink, wink, and a wafer if you've got any. He sits down at the bar, and Manolo comes to give him a bottle. And in the process of like reaching out to grab it off the ground, it falls. We see that he's got blood on his hands, so he's been injured, which obviously indicates to everybody that maybe he's the guy who shot the policeman earlier. The bartender's running out of the door to report this to the town constable, and our dignified alien visitor cold cocks him with a bottle of wine.
He comes in peace, Fred. He's misunderstood.
Yeah. He's just giving people a lot of thus far on Earth, all he's done is shot somebody and knocked somebody out with a glass of wine or a bottle of wine.
He a cop, Fred. Okay, he shot a cop in the face. So what?
Yeah, all right.
What? It was a misunderstanding. Here, look. He even explains.
I tried to explain before to that policeman or soldier or whoever it was. I tried to tell him that I came in peace. He wanted to kill me. I tried to get the gun away from him, and it went off against his body.
Mm-hmm. Save it for the lawyer.
Yeah, exactly. You have the right to remain silent.
I didn't even think about it, but coupled with the beating the bartender over the head after he's just given you a bottle of wine, it's like,
it's a defense that holds up in the court of people watching a TV show, because he's the good guy because of the music. But yeah, if taken factually, I don't know. At this point, the stranger's already revealed that he's the one who killed the policeman. And in the next scene, Pedro is taking care of the guy in the back room of the cantina. Mm-hmm. And the stranger gives Pedro a gift because he's so naive and innocent and sweet, unlike everybody else. The gift looks kind of like a fancy silver cigar box-ish.
Sure.
Was this the first time that you saw the episode?
Mm-hmm.
What did you immediately think the gift would be once it was given?
Huh. I can't say I thought about it too much. I assumed it was a good thing. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I guess I didn't really think deeply. But, I didn't think he was giving them a weapon. I assumed it's the machine that makes ham sandwiches or something really positive, some good tech or. It
would be a weird reversal if it was just a dirty hypodermic needle. Here's the gift.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny because I saw this episode a long time ago and haven't seen it in probably a decade, if that. And I remember the twist at the end, or so to speak. Mm-hmm. But I didn't remember what there actually being a physical gift. And so when I saw the fancy cigar box, I was like, oh, weird. What is that thing?
It's a box of fine Cubans.
Yes, exactly.
Can't get them there.
It's a nice gift.
I think you've hinted at this in your intro. Pedro really just skyrockets up the charts of poor children actors we have. He has more lines, but here's just an example of what you're getting with little Pedro.
It's very odd, Pedro. Very odd indeed. That there's only one person who feels neither fear nor anger. And this is a boy.
It is because we are alike. You are a stranger, and in a way, I am a stranger too.
The Mystery Science Theater Christmas episode Santa Claus, I feel like you get a lot of line reads that are just right up on that alley. That kid would fit in well in some of those.
Yeah, it's you can understand all the words that he's saying, but because they're so absent of emotion, it's hard to understand him in a weird way.
It's very Wes Anderson-y. I think different era, he could have gone far.
Yeah. The doctor arrives to take care of the stranger's wounds, and for some reason, this strange stranger doesn't want painkillers. That was sort of...
He apparently was a cooler in Missouri.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Pain don't hurt none, Fred.
Yeah. I didn't exactly understand that, because it's at this point we know he's an alien, but it's do aliens not...
But he's also a badass.
Yeah, exactly. The alien did some time on the bouncer circuit west of Amarillo. In the next scene, the doctor and the bartender and Pedro are discussing the situation, and Manolo reveals that after he recovered from the blunt trauma, he ratted out the stranger to the local police. I feel like the doctor is really high and mighty about it. If you found out that someone shot a cop, came into your bar and knocked you out with a wine bottle, and then you ratted out the person, don't you feel like he'd be on relatively solid ground?
No snitches, Fred.
Snitches get stitches. The doctor's like stone cold, and he like ups the biblical metaphor because at the end, like he's Manolo's...
Fred, all this guy at this point, all the guy has done is murder a cop and assault a guy that he's staying at his house. That's all he's done, and you're trying to like lay all this stuff at his feet. He didn't do yet. I mean, he's planning on it, but he hasn't done it yet.
Yeah, call me a Law and Order candidate. But as Manolo's like counting his pieces of silver, wink, the doctor's like, Manolo, at birth your mother should have, instead of on the birth certificate written Manolo, written another name entirely she should have. And Manolo's like, what would that name be, senor? And he's like, Judas. And then just drops the mic and rolls out.
It was pretty vicious. I mean, he did say it should have been his baptism name. And
right.
I do think very few priests would have gone forward with that chosen baptism name.
Exactly.
I don't know.
How many Judases are there exactly?
My
name is Judas.
It's a hard
Hitler.
name to win back, you know?
Pedro and the stranger are alone in the next scene, kind of hanging out and talking about vague...
Just kind of shooting the S,
shooting the... what would it be? The M.
Exactly.
In Espanol. And Pedro asks the stranger if he comes from the stars. And the stranger's, again, pretty badass about it. Did you hear this little bit?
I forget. What does he say?
He says, from beyond the stars, kid.
Whoa. Seriously, put Patrick Swayze in this role and it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, nice try, kid.
He baffled me. I don't know if he confused Pedro with this one, but Pedro was kind of worried that his new best buddy might be heading out soon.
And then I must leave.
For good, senor? For good and all?
Oh, no, Pedro. There's no such thing as for good and all. There is only forever. I will come back sometime.
I kind of let that one roll, but what does that mean?
No, not for good and all. Forever. Like, is he just correcting his grammar?
Yeah.
Or he seems to be saying that he will come back, but he's like, no, I'll just be gone forever, kid.
Yeah.
But then I'll come back.
Like, what? Like, no, not for good and all. Forever, but I'll be back. Like,
but it might not be me. I cut it short. He's like, or someone else. It's just like, what's happening?
English
this
is
guy's
his second
clearly
language.
in the middle of a psychotic episode.
Yeah. I mean, English is his second language, and presumably he's speaking Spanish. So I don't know. Maybe it's like a language thing. Maybe like his Google Translate put that one out weird. He's got his like iPhone. He's sort of looking at it in his robes.
I think this is the moment in the episode where we can safely say we've found our Christmas episode. Here's where any attempt at subtext goes out the window, and we just get some text.
Where you're from, is there a God?
The same God, Pedro.
I wonder.
What?
If God were to come to Earth, would they find him so strange that they would be afraid, and would they shoot him?
Did not his son come once, Pedro?
And they nailed him to a cross.
And then spent 2,000 years learning to believe in him.
Yeah, remember about Matthew 4:15 when he shoots the cop right when he arrives? Like, it's the manger, everyone's around, the kings are there, and he just opens fire and then beats the innkeeper over the head with a wine bottle.
Yeah, that was the New Testament.
Just misunderstood in his own time, Pedro. That's all it is.
Yes, the miracle of the loaves and the fish is left out that part. When Jesus turned water bottles into wine bottles, started knocking
bludgeon orgy.
Yeah. Funny you mentioned that we really nailed it with the Christmas episode. It's like, yes, everybody knows Jesus died on Christmas Day. We kind of sort of got there. So the regional police arrive, like the people that they've telegrammed for. They finally got through reading the telegram, and they're there 3 days later. Very sort of tertiary, hot or not. Did you think one of them looked a little bit like Burt Reynolds?
I'd have to see the one in question, but I didn't think of one off the top of my head. No.
Well, that'll be another Adam Scott for the Tumblr.
Yeah.
They're there to get the stranger. And they go in through the bar, and everybody's like, oh, we kept him safe, but clearly they're afraid to go in and tackle him. So the cops roll up, but apparently alien Jesus flew the coop and jumped out the window.
Just like in the Bible. It's all the parallels are coming through.
And lo, he jumped through the window.
Right. And he used the small boy as a diversion.
Yes. And lo... And lo, he fell to the ground with the agility of a cat.
Exactly.
Like
Merry
Ninja
Christmas.
Jesus. And we see like all this disarray in the town. Like everybody's like, what's happening? Oh gosh, is Jesus
Right.
what?
Every who in Whoville is upset.
Yes. Did you notice there's like a cool insert shot of a woman looking distraught out of a window? And did you notice how on the windowsill she'd like put broken glass on the sill so nobody could crawl through it?
No, but that's very cool.
Yeah.
It's a Die Hard reference.
Yes.
I like it.
Yet another
Christmas
one.
parallels are just folding in on each other.
Exactly. We've reached peak Christmas reference. Like a crowd of people, including the regional police, arrive. And they've cornered the stranger who's almost made his way out of town. And he's holding up his arms very meaningfully. And he asks Pedro to show them the gift that was given. And things start moving real fast and dumb here because Pedro gives Manolo the gift and he just throws it to the ground. Like it's almost like he opens it and then just throws it down without looking at it. And me describing that makes it seem sort of plausible, like it makes sense, but it really doesn't read that way.
Right.
Anyway,
yeah, it's a pressure cooker situation.
Yeah, so he throws it to the ground, and then just as quickly somebody else says it's black magic and throws a torch on it, which starts burning this mysterious gift. And Pedro starts making his way towards the alien to try and protect him, or Jesus, or whatever. And the stranger starts kind of like leaning forward towards Pedro, and someone shouts out like, "Oh no, he's trying to hurt the boy!" And they open fire.
Right.
And the stranger gets shot.
Though we must be clear, he stumbles back and has no gunshot wounds. But
yes, well,
the shots are definitely implied.
Yes, shots are heavily implied.
Yes.
We suffered heavy implication of gunfire today. The stranger is lying there on the ground, and Pedro is the only one brave enough to sort of go over and stand with the body, and he doesn't seem too bummed about the death of his friend.
Yeah, he's not an he keeps it close to the vest, that Pedro.
Exactly.
Still waters run deep, Fred.
Yeah. At this point, the doctor arrives to pick up the gift, which he brushes off the flames and starts reading from it, and it's a greeting card.
It turns out, es un libro de cocina.
Nice.
I'll bring you this gift. The following chemical formula is a vaccine. It's a vaccine against all forms of cancer. That's all there is. The rest has been burned. So we have not just killed a man. We've killed a dream.
I wonder if the alien spelled it cancer.
I don't know. It's hard not to just think of cookbook right
Yeah,
now.
no,
I mean,
I
like,
know.
just kind of think like if they had like the rest of the ashy page, they'd see that it's like somehow it's not a cure for cancer. It's like how to give cancer to 50 humans or something.
Not too much else happens here. I think at this point we pull away. The church bells toll. The ironic comeuppance music cue plays.
It's Christmas morning.
Yes, exactly. And Serling comes through with an outro.
Madero, Mexico. The present. The subject, fear. The cure, a little more faith. An RX off a shelf in the Twilight Zone.
Just have faith in the guy who killed the cop and beat the innkeeper to death. Tried to, anyway.
The parable or the allegory or whatever you want to call it is very clear in this episode, but it's also not clear because I didn't get whether he was an alien or like an angel.
I just always assumed he was an alien, but I don't know. I guess that's a valid read.
You know, because when he said like I come from beyond the stars, I took that to mean like maybe heaven.
Right. And we believe in the same God here.
Yeah, but even if we believe in the same God, is the Bible the same on an alien planet? That just seems wrong.
C.S. Lewis, his space trilogy, addressed those issues, so we can leave that to that.
Yes, exactly. I'm sure everyone's read them. If you read one C.S. Lewis book. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel to some degree that the religious stuff is kind of not necessary for the episode. Like it works as kind of...
Fred, that's the good stuff. That's the meat. I don't know. It feels like it feels really, really shoved in, I thought.
I mean, the episode works, whether you like it or don't, I think it works just as well without being like, they refuse Jesus too. It was just trying to add like an artificial amount of weight to something that was like a kind of pretty boilerplate sci-fi story.
Like if you take away the religious implications, it becomes like super, super lightweight, but with them, it doesn't make it like a good story. It becomes, you know, overwrought or just like silly on the nose. I just don't think it's like that great a tale. Do you think there's anything strange about how the episode The Big Tall Wish we discussed, and it gets lauded for having, you know, a almost entirely African American cast and how groundbreaking that was at the time, and this episode has, in theory, an almost entirely, you know, Hispanic Mexican American cast, but it's almost, you know, it's largely white people portraying Hispanics. Like, it just struck me as very weird that, like, Twilight Zone, you know, it got a lot of points for Big Tall Wish, and it should, but it's like, this was also like a weird reductive thing that was going on at the time that, you know, we just hadn't really come around on like caring about.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that like A Big Tall Wish is an interesting episode because like even though it doesn't really touch on like civil rights at all, it weirdly feels like it has that echo because of, you know, African American experience in America. And this one just feels more like it's kind of like cheap exotica almost, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like
I mean, yeah, if anything, it's kind of, you know, it's pretty patronizing to whatever like Mexican experience there is. They're just, the townspeople are considered, they're remote and cut off from the 20th century, and they throw, you know, flaming sticks at anything that scares them. So
yeah, I mean, I think to some extent, like it's not like the episode is like really patronizing to the degree that this kind of thing could be, because there's like, you know, there's a range of responses to it like there would be at any level of society. Like the doctor, like the doctor is, you know, totally has a sophisticated take on it, and then there's some people who are just throwing flaming rocks at it. I think mainly it's just like, you know, it's portraying a Mexican village without real Mexican actors and in kind of like a slightly ham-fisted way. I think they basically just wanted to, you know, take this story that has this religious parallel and just put it as far away from like, you know, where you'd quote unquote expect to see that kind of story. And like, I think that's another thing about why it feels a little bit different than the normal Twilight Zone. If Rod had written this one like in 1961 from scratch, it probably would have been like in a small suburban town or something like that, because that was where his head was at the time. I feel like, you know, setting something in a remote Mexican village it just doesn't feel very Twilight Zone-y in a weird way.
It was totally acceptable and not that odd at the time, but the fact that like if The Big Tall Wish had been done with almost entirely white actors in blackface, it would have been a scandal and horrible taste, and, you know, it obviously would be considered like a huge disgrace instead of the great thing it is. But like this episode, it's primarily, you know, white or Italian or a Russian or whatever actors pretending to be Hispanic people, and like no one blinks an eye or even thinks about it today. Is like, that was odd.
Yeah, well, I mean, I definitely thought it was odd, and especially like,
I mean, it's just like it's just kind of like, they can't pull off the accents, but it's not really like, that's kind of offensive, isn't it?
It is offensive. No,
I don't know.
I think,
or am I just like reaching out to be offended? Am I like just wanting to be offended by something? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think it's like offensive, but I also think like, you know, you watch it as a modern viewer, understanding that like people had different ideas back then. I mean, stuff that like, you know, we do now, I'm sure will be found offensive in 60 years. And I guess I try and like, you know, acknowledge something that's like offensive, but also like give it the benefit of the doubt to the degree that it's like not
context.
Yeah, like to appreciate the context of it. The idea of white actors playing black characters is like really rooted in this like exploitative thing, blackface, you know, that whole tradition of minstrelry and American culture, and it taps into something like much more in our like national DNA, you know what I mean? Because obviously it didn't have like
much more touchy and twitchy.
Yeah,
and
I don't know like, for a fact that there weren't any indigenous Mexican people enslaved during slavery, but obviously like that's a much more loaded thing in American society, and the idea of like a non-Mexican character playing a Mexican part is like, it's like offensive and a little like tacky and tasteless, but it's not quite as loaded with the weight of slavery in American history. It is it's crappy, but I think it has a different kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. Cool. Cool. Did you find it's basically like a kind of a flip of To Serve Man?
Yeah, that's my only other thought, is that it's like an inverse of it. But why do we like To Serve Man and not like this? Because, I mean, not to say that I hate this. It's just that, like, why does To Serve Man work pretty well as a, fun romp? And this one, even though it's basically the same thing, feels a little bit more like...
I think a lot of it's point of view, or at least how the, like, central alien or angel, what have you, the stranger is portrayed. In To Serve Man, we take the perspective throughout that we're a little nervous about them, but everything they do shows us that they're good, they're good, they're good, they're good, they're good.
Yeah.
And then it's just in the last 30 seconds, it's like, oh my gosh, no, they're evil, it's bad. Whereas this one, the episode's trying to tell us, like, he's good, he's good, he's good, no, he's good, he's misunderstood. And then at the end, it's like, it was a twist. He was really good.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Yeah. He was even more good.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, the end isn't... They act like it's a twist, but it's like, did anyone really think the thing in the silver box was, like, a weapon or dangerous? Or, like, I never got even a hint of that, even though when we talk about it, you do think, like... I think the townspeople maybe had a point of being so scared of this guy, but... The episode is so clearly in his corner, you never feel that.
Yeah. It kind of makes me think, well, how would it have been if, like, you'd never really seen this stranger until the very end, and it's just the townspeople being afraid of this shadowy figure.
Right.
Who the problem is it's hard to convincingly portray a good character continuously, like, causing mayhem.
But misunderstood.
Without actually giving you their perspective. Like, it would have been weird if it's just like this shadowy alien that just like accidentally like stumbles and shoots like 12 people.
Right.
I think
it kind of makes me think, did you ever see Tucker and Dale versus Evil?
No, never heard of that.
You should look out for it on Netflix. It's a very amusing kind of riff on horror movies. Basically, like, the main characters, when viewed from a wrong perspective, appear to be like the villains in a horror movie. From, like, there's a group of teenagers out in a cabin and they think these two redneck guys are like crazed hillbillies, but it's all just kooky mishaps. It's really funny.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I feel to some degree like a character being a protagonist or an antagonist is is related to perspective, you know what I mean? But I think like that's the pretentious statement I just made is maybe not even, this episode is maybe just more, it's not about perspective exactly. It's just a more like clear, ironic flip. It just doesn't have the payoff because it's not as like, it's so clearly telegraphing it.
Yeah, I mean, those people think he's evil and it turns out he's good, but the audience isn't on board with the crazed crowd. So like in To Serve Man, the audience is on board with
but not really
everyone else,
because in the very beginning,
except for they kind of blow it with the framing device, but everyone forgets the framing device. Right?
True. That's true, and they knew that everyone would. I think to some degree To Serve Man is just more fun, and this one is a little bit like it's trying to make this,
it's heavy-handed.
Yeah, and I think the fundamental point of like, you think this character is supposed to be bad but they're good, is sort of more sanctimonious than the other one, which is like, beware of strangers bearing gifts. And I think that it's like, I don't know, maybe it's like a little bit of a drag to be like, oh yeah. Whereas like the strangers bearing gifts thing is a little more like titillating and exciting. You know what I mean?
To Serve Man's kind of the response to this episode. Serling's like, you need to be have a little more faith in people from outer space. And you're like, okay, Rod. Yeah. Could be a cookbook.
That's not what you said in season 1, but hey. Maybe things would have gone differently for the Canimits if they just started slugging UN delegates with wine bottles.
What we doing next?
Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Yeah. Foxtrot, Siegfried, Mark Grams Jr., Siegfried and Grams, and IMDB.
So this was originally considered for the pilot of the Twilight Zone. I'm sure you probably have some more details. I have some. My understanding is it was pretty heavily rewritten from the original 1 hour long episode that would have been served as a pilot to this. There was something involving a child kind of the Pedro character would have had a dad who died building his own rocket, and then he would have encountered an alien, then he would have become an astronaut himself. Like, there just seemed like there was a lot more going on from what I understood. Do you have any light to shed on that?
Well, Martin Grimm's doesn't have much more than that. There's another weird element of it, which is just that, like, originally the title of this was I Shot an Arrow into the Air.
Right.
Which makes it really confusing because this episode obviously has very little to do with that one. I think Serling just liked that as a title and was just like, well, let's see what it sticks to. You know what I mean? This was either a pilot for the Twilight Zone or a pilot for kind of another show that was sort of similar to the Twilight Zone. That's the part that I guess I don't get.
One way or another, this was an existing Serling script that got retooled to fit in this place.
I know, something about it feels a little bit un-Twilight Zone-y to me, like the fact that they deliberately reference like God's only son and stuff like that. I don't know. Like, I mean, it fits. It's not like it's so far out of it, but I can see it being taken from another world and put into the Twilight Zone.
The score was original by Lorindo Almeida.
Oh, cool.
A classical guitarist.
Oh, yeah, I noticed there was a lot of that.
He
wrote himself two
I didn't know if you
were
I don't know if you were familiar with his work or not.
I'm not, no, and now I feel bad because I left Reba Wisner's excellent book about the Twilight Zone music back in New York, but I'll have to look at it when I get back. I thought the score was great. It was very moody and cool.
Other than that, not really much trivia. Zickery kind of toured a new one in the Twilight Zone Companion. He didn't think much of it. And Buck Houghton, I think, had a quote that was more or less just like, yeah, that kid actor, he had a real good look, but poor guy couldn't act. Something like that.
It was JoJo's foreign cousin, Yo-Yo.
Right.
Martin Grimm Jr. doesn't have a ton more than what we've discussed. Kind of a weird, strange little coincidence, but the blind guitar player, this is his last appearance as an actor. He died, I think, the day after they stopped filming it, so kind of a sad little thing, but it's kind of a nice little cameo to go out on. I mean, I'm sure he would have preferred like
King Lear.
There you
probably,
go. But the
like
blind
the
guitar player in the saloon, I'm sure, just as good. Anyway, what about BIOS?
Jeffrey Horn played the stranger. He was actually, for us complaining that he was maybe just a normal old white guy, he was born in Argentina. He was raised in Cuba. He was a longtime member of the Actors Studio.
See, maybe they thought that he, came across like as, more of like a random Anglo guy, but he looked very much like it. Argentinian people often, do look very European.
Yeah, well, that's the stereotype anyway.
I knew we'd get twitchy one way or the other.
Yeah.
Cool.
Let's see. Paul Mazursky played one of the officers. He was also in the episode He's Alive in the Purple Testament, and as I mentioned, he became a pretty famous director in his own right. Vladimir Sokolov played the guitarist Ignacio. He was also in the episodes The Mirror and and not The Dust, just Dust. And he was a Russian. He was Russian-born.
Interesting. Yeah, he was the guy who passed away.
Vito Scotti played Rudolfo. He was also in Beavis. Joe Perry played Man Number 1. He was also in Nightmare as a Child, written by Serling, directed by Alan H. Miner. He did not do any other Twilight Zone episodes. He did direct 4 episodes of Rod Serling's short-run follow-up TV show called The Loner.
So I've never heard of that. Interesting.
Well, that's the kind of interesting tidbits you'll find out if you happen to read Anne Serling's book, As I Knew Him, by Anne Serling.
Which you can get a signed copy of if you win our contest, although technically this episode comes out on the day that it closes. Maybe let's give people another
maybe
week.
We'll extend it a week. Yeah, what the heck. Let's see, so that brings us to the...
Inevitable.
MST3K. Good to have it back. We like to find connections between Mystery Science Theater 3000 and the Twilight Zone. What do we got this week, John?
This week, Cliff Osmond played Manolo, the bartender. He was originally discovered by the director Billy Wilder, played in several of his films, but he happened to be in a movie called Hangar 18, which was featured in the initial KTMA run of Mystery Science Theater back in the Twin Cities. So
nice.
As close as we can get.
Cool. I like it.
All right.
What about IMDb ratings?
IMDb gives this episode a 7.1. Kind of low middle,
Low middle, as opposed to last week's high middle. I think it's kind of a harmless and decent episode of the Twilight Zone. And one thing we didn't really talk about all that much was the fact that I think the mood of it is really cool, and that they really committed to the setting. It doesn't, I mean, it is a set, obviously, but like it's an extensive one. And I feel like it's kind of like dark and gloomy, and it's got a cool tone, sort of the way that Come Wander With Me had, you know, like maybe not the best plot we've ever seen, but kind of like a cool vibe to it. So I'm kind of leaning, I'm in the 5 range. I don't think it's like flat out bad. What about you?
I don't know if it's terrible bad, but I don't think it's good. I'm not impressed by pretty much any of the performances. I actually thought it was fairly dull for chunks of it. I mean, like the main dramatic action happens to be like, you know, a kid and a guy lying on a cot having conversation.
They're not lying together, just to clarify that.
Well, no.
True.
It's not The Fugitive, Fred. Come on. I agree that it's got a nice tone. I think it's nice that it has a, you know, varied setting from what we're used to, and the score, even though I didn't love it, I do appreciate that they did something different. It's kind of more like intellectually I can appreciate some aspects of this show, but I don't think it adds up to a particularly good one. I think the twist doesn't really make for a twist because of the reasons we've discussed. Yeah. Like if the episode is just like, no, he's a good guy. No, he's a good guy. Confirmation, he's a good guy. That doesn't really tell me anything more. Yeah. So all this to say, it wasn't like horribly put together. It's borderline forgettable, but I don't know. I think the knocks against it, the heavy-handed religious stuff, like overall just not that interesting a story, puts it kind of more in the 3+ range for me.
Yeah, I think that's a bit harsh. I mean, I understand why. Like, you're right. It's not that enjoyable. But
I feel like I can't give things 4s anymore unless they're 4th season. So
all of those complaints would be a lot like louder and more problematic if it was like 2 hours long or something. But I feel like, you know, a nice mood, a relatively decent, don't be mean to the alien type plot, and like, you know, a nice little score and an interesting setting. I think that goes, you know, those go farther for the half-hour episodes. You know, of course, most Twilight Zone episodes are. So I'm going to give it a 5.
If the kid had been good,
yes,
I think maybe I feel like they're trying to do this relationship of these two people. Yeah. One a person who's an actual like alien or angel, one person who actually doesn't belong on the earth, and one person who feels like he doesn't belong, and they're supposed to have this bond, and it should be like a tragic moment at the end with like the guy dying in the kid's arms. I should be feeling like E.T. vibes or something, and I'm feeling absolutely nothing at all. Yeah. And so if they nailed that, then maybe I'd be in the like 5 or 6 range, but no.
The kid is a bit of a damp squib. They needed Jose Mumi to come in and do it. All right, well, that wraps it up for The Gift. Thanks so much to... Well, did anyone even want this damn one? I don't know. Did we just...
It was requested by Christmas fans everywhere.
Cool, yes. Thank you to anyone who wanted in their heart of hearts for us to do this episode. Next week, we're going to do a listener request. We don't know what it is yet, so stay tuned to our social medias.
I can't promise we'll be here next week.
Okay,
I think we got the holidays, but we'll get back to you soon.
Yeah, sure. And also, we're going to extend the deadline for the holiday giveaway contest.
Yes.
So you got a little bit longer. Please enter. The prizes are cool, but more than that, it's just fun. And if we like your entry, we'll definitely play it on the podcast, and you'll be adored by the 1,000 of listeners that we have. So maybe a little more of that now. But anyway, John, how can people get in touch with us?
You can send us an email at twilightpwn@gmail.com. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at twilightpwn. You can check out our website, twilightpwn.tumblr.com. You can like us on Facebook. You can listen to us on any kind of podcatcher app, and you could subscribe to us in iTunes. If you're over there, if you leave us a rating or review, we really appreciate those. To that end, let me say thank you to It's Ya Girl E. Roberts and former Proj for leaving us a couple of reviews. We really like reading those, so thanks.
Cool, thanks so much. It's Ya Girl E. Raj. So yeah, I don't know, for the outro, have you any memorable gifts in your lifetime?
Now I look like a terrible person.
I actually can't think of one either. I was hoping to think of something while you answered the question.
Well, this isn't like the best gift I ever received, but it's just popping into my head. You know, I was one of those terrible kids that would snoop around for presents before Christmas, and my mom didn't make a huge effort to hide them. And I do remember one year I got so overzealous about the gift. It was, it was getting past the point where we needed to go through this Santa thing and all. But I wanted a Sega CD player.
Yeah, sure.
Great system. And I'd gotten it. It was in my mom's closet. And I remember there was at least one or two times when she was gone and, at work, and I knew she wasn't coming back, and I just got it out and played it a couple times before Christmas morning.
That's amazing.
So, Merry Christmas. I don't think I even had games, because the games were, wrapped and sealed, so I think I just, powered it up and, looked at the load screen and was like, whoa.
That's awesome.
So, how about you?
That's really kind of adorable. I can't think of an individual present, but since you set it up with that story, I don't feel as bad. But my dad is notoriously, I feel bad because I'm in his computer room saying this, but he's notoriously kind of a bad gift giver. I mean, he'll get you what you want if you tell him, but if you don't tell him, it's gonna be random.
Yeah, he's adrift, right?
Yeah, and it's right. You get a few presents for Christmas and or solstice or whatever it is, and you can kind of track his progression through Costco as he buys the gifts. The first one is always some new socks, and the second one is always a tin of cookies, and then you're oh, Dad's in the electronics section, so I got a new razor, and then it's a steak at the end because the meat's in the back. Anyway,
it's good quality beef, right?
Anyway, I love my dad. Merry Christmas. It is quality beef. It's good quality beef. So I'll talk to you soon, Sean. Maybe next week, maybe the week after. Have a happy Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
All right, thanks. You too, Fred.
Bye. So I'll just assume that whoever's listening to this is at the end of the podcast. So welcome. Welcome to the Easter egg, the Eddie E. Deezen flamed Easter egg. Yeah, Eddie Deezen is in an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000 Laser Blast. And
he's also in War Games, which is what I was trying to explain to my wife.
Oh, he's also in Grease, right? Or no, not Grease.
Yeah,
Grease, yeah.
Porky's Grease, yeah.
He plays a classic nerd character.
Yeah, super nerd.
I saw Laser Blast at 4 or 5 years ago, the episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000. And there's a line where someone's saying about another character, oh, do you like Chucky's Red Hot Frank? Making kind of a wiener joke. And, he's from what I hear, it isn't so hot. And Eddie Deezen comes in and says he's got affidavits about his wiener or something. And it's, the most obscure, weird line to throw into a pool party horror movie.
Right.
And so, I've always wondered, did Eddie Deezen just say, make that line up? Because how could that be written in? And so I followed him on Twitter, and somehow his Twitter, he doesn't have any Twitter followers. He's got 5 or 6 or something. And somehow Twitter added his email to my contact in Gmail. And one day I was just randomly typing through the E's, and I was like, oh, I have Eddie Deezen's email address. And so I wrote him asking him whether he made up that line in Laser Blast. And he wrote back, he said, almost certainly not. But he did remember that he had a crush on the script girl. And then he ended the email exchange saying Happy Hanukkah in all caps. So that's Eddie Deezen.
Interesting.
I'll put it on the Tumblr in case anyone's curious.
Cool. Yeah, I was explaining how I thought he was a good example of Asperger's before we really knew Asperger's as a thing in War Games. There's a great line where he's being very Eddie Deezen, and the other guy says, you remember you asked me to tell you when you're being rude and insensitive? You're doing it right now. My wife was like, she works with people like that. So she was like, oh, yeah, that is actually good technique.
Yeah, on the spectrum before the spectrum.
Yep. So
anyway, since this is the end of the podcast, see you guys later.
All right.